one of the key things for me is that we talk so much about mental health awareness towards men and let men understand that it's okay to talk to somebody and, be vulnerable and open up your emotions. I have failed or I have struggled. I have lived through pain and I got through to the other side of it. And essentially normalizing that conversation where we say, it's, I'm not going to tell you that it's okay that you talk about these things. I am going to show you by talking about these things. So when you speak to somebody and they ask you, so how are you doing? Instead of putting on this mask and saying, I'm all right, thanks, I'm doing okay, it's like for us who have been through the pain, who have been through the struggle, to go first and to say, do you know what? Right now I'm okay. But 2 weeks ago, I was really deeply struggling.
Life flows like an endless ocean of stories. We often miss these precious tales as we rush through our days, too consumed by daily struggles to notice the poetry swirling around us. Yet within these stories lie the keys to our past, sparks for our creativity, and fresh winds to fill our sails. I am Abhra, a writer based in Melbourne, in quest of those stories with diverse voices that tell them from every corner of the world. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. Hi, Oliver. Welcome to Stories and Stanza. How are you doing today?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm good. I'm good, thanks. Yeah, it's interesting to observe the mind in the morning.
Yes. So, looking forward to hearing from you. And as we briefly met on threads and exchanged ideas, I really liked what you were sharing about journaling, and I look forward to explore that with you in today's episode. Before we get started, could you briefly introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. So my journey into journaling is quite a long one, and I use journaling as a tool for myself, for my own mental health since I was about, I don't know, 15, 16. It's hard to remember exactly, but the key for me at that point was that I used writing as a way to decompress, to release a lot of the heavy emotions. But I don't think at that time I was aware of what I was doing. It was just a need that came out. And then later on, I studied creative writing and journalism. And probably around 10 years ago now, I did a course in shadow writing, which was very much a game changer for me because just learning how to write more deeply and more honestly about my own emotions kind of opened up a completely different world of journaling for me. Now, the initial idea with shadow writing wasn't about journaling, it was about writing fictional characters that have an emotional depth. And the way that I saw it was you can only write a fictional character that has a depth of emotional register that's the same as yours. So you can write a character that's shallower than you, but you can't write a character that's deeper than you. So in order to write deep, interesting characters in a book, you need to have a deep, introspective view of yourself. And that process helped me deal with a lot of my own shadow work. And I have to say that's it's been life changing just because it opened up so many doors. And essentially that took me to where I am today, where now I'm teaching shadow journaling, and it's just ridiculous to see how fast people have results from it. People have deep insights just through simple prompts, through simple exercises, and yeah, now this is what I do for myself as well. So teaching workshops and writing my exploring my own insides.
That is amazing. And in Stories and Stanza, I call this section "Fail with Me" because I had a few difficult years and I had some challenging period of mental health, both me and my wife. And it took us a long time to come out of it. And when I came out of it, I started understanding my past really well. So, in a way, what you are explaining, I think I have experienced that firsthand at some stage that you are, in a loop, you are kind of stuck and you're not able to come out of it. So, that was my very difficult phase. And when I came out of it, I could see things very crystal clear. And before that happened, I used to think that my life is a failure. And which is why I started this series called Fail With Me, is that to understand what are we putting inside that box that we label as failure, unpack that and understand ourselves. So in a way, what you are teaching and telling people that has a strong connection with this podcast. So how does that idea of calling it Fail With Me sit with you?
Yeah, I was thinking a bit about this, and my first response to it was I wasn't quite sure. And then I was kind of allowing myself to sit with it a bit longer, and I realized that I think the concept of fail with me has the three aspects to it, which is interesting. First, you've got talking about failure, which is a very subjective measure. It's not an objective definition of what failure is because you can just as easily take it as a learning experience. So it becomes a subjective experience in that moment when it feels like that. And with is a sense of kind of community, which I thought was great. And that me becomes this individualistic kind of experiencing in this. And you talk about it from a mental health perspective, and I've had a lot of my own mental health issues, and it's also one of the reasons why I'm teaching this. But particularly, I was interested in men and mental health. And one of the key things for me is that we talk so much about mental health awareness towards men and let men understand that it's okay to talk to somebody and, be vulnerable and open up your emotions. But I don't know if more awareness is what's needed. I think what's needed is action. And I think that's what you are doing in this. And this is what I'm trying to do as well. And the fail with me part is going out and saying, I have failed or I have struggled. I have lived through pain and I got through to the other side of it. And essentially normalizing that conversation where we say, it's, I'm not going to tell you that it's okay that you talk about these things. I am going to show you by talking about these things. So when you speak to somebody and they ask you, so how are you doing? Instead of putting on this mask and saying, I'm all right, thanks, I'm doing okay, it's like for us who have been through the pain, who have been through the struggle, to go first and to say, do you know what? Right now I'm okay. But 2 weeks ago, I was really deeply struggling. I was going through depression. I didn't have anybody to talk to. And even if I had somebody to talk to, I probably would have been too scared. And open up the fact that these emotions are normal. But unfortunately, what we're doing is we're normalizing glossing over it. We're normalizing, I'm fine. I'm okay. Everything is, you know, I'm managing. But it's sometimes we're not managing. I mean, that's some like I went through a very long depression last year, and I remember one morning when I woke up, and the first thing I did was just started crying. That's not managing. That's not the way that I should start my day. That was kind of my rock bottom, but that was the point where I also started being more free to speak about it afterwards. So when people were asking me how I was doing, now I'm much more willing to say, do you know what? I'm actually feeling pretty shit. And I think that helps. And that to me is what the fail with me aspect is, that I have had my personal failures. I will share them with you so that you can perhaps open up the door earlier than I did.
Absolutely spot on in that analysis, I would say that normalizing, and the more you talk about it, it probably resonates with somebody who needs to hear that. So, for our audience, can you give us an overview of shadow work? Explain what it is.
Yeah, so I don't know how many people are familiar with Jung. I mean, I'm sure people are familiar with the name at least. And he talked a lot about shadow work, but there's lots of people have been working with Jung's concepts since he died and his works have been published. But on a very simple explanation of it, I'll use Robert Bly, an amazing writer, his description of it. He says the first 20 years of our lives, we take, we fill our shadow. He calls it a sack, a backpack. And essentially, it's all the stuff that we try out in the world that gets pushed back. So when you're a kid and you do certain things and your parents say, well, you can't do that, or your friends tease you for doing something, or they're bullying you, all these things get chucked in the backpack. And it can be positive things, it can be negative things, it can be personal stuff. It doesn't matter. The point is that we spend 20 years chucking it in this backpack. And then Robert Bly says we spend the rest of our lives unpacking it because there's so many things in there that we have to now deal with. So a lot of the time, people look at shadow work as something that's very heavy, that it's about dealing with our traumas, that it's, all the heavy things that we have. And there is a lot of heavy stuff there, but there's also a lot of good in there. And I think this is where a big part of my work lies, rather than looking at it from a therapeutic sense and going, right, let's unpack your trauma and take a look at it in very, nitty-gritty detail. A lot of the time, it's about what they call integration. I'm not a big fan of the word integration. I think it sounds very abstract, but in the end, it's for me, it's about becoming more complete, more whole, and accepting that we carry a lot of emotions. We have a range of emotions that we don't accept. Like we are jealous, we can be envious, we might get angry because somebody behaves in a certain way and we don't know why. There's a lot of irrationalities that come up, and shadow work and the way I'm doing it is through journaling is so much just about observing it. And a lot of the time, just the process of observing and accepting the fact that we have that full range, we start to release a lot of energy. And that's what I'm finding extremely fascinating right now. So we have certain emotions that we're not supposed to have, right? So jealousy is a particular one. And feeling envy, we kind of push it down. And when we feel it, a lot of the time we're like, I don't want to feel this. And that requires a lot of energy. And it requires that in a lot of situations. Now, imagine that let's just to take a stupid example, that you're at some networking event and a lot of successful people out there, and you're walking around with a feeling of jealousy and envy. It means in a lot of these conversations, you have to kind of keep hiding that. But if you can release that and release that feeling and just say, do you know what? I feel that I am jealous and I'm envious of these people's success. And you can look at that emotion and go, why is it? What is it that I'm looking for? And be willing to accept that. Perhaps I've been hiding the fact that I want to be seen. I want to be well known. I want to be successful. And then suddenly we're touching on emotions that are, you know, don't think too much of yourself. Don't kind of make yourself bigger than anyone else. And a lot of stuff that been kind of been told before, just be like everyone else. But then you see these people being successful and you want that, but you're hiding it because you don't want to. Like there's a lot of emotions coming up here and they're in a different range, right? But by first accepting, okay, I feel jealous. Okay, why do I feel jealous? I want to be successful. I shouldn't feel successful. And accepting that, then go, well, actually, what's wrong with me being successful? what's wrong with me saying, do you know what? I want to be rich. And then saying, I want to be rich because I want to be generous. I want to help other people. And coming to terms with a lot of this stuff is what I would call shadow journaling because it's an honest and curious observation of who we are and where we come from. And when we can look at that, one thing is it allows us to grow into that new version of ourselves, the one that's not hampered by all these limitations that other people have given us before. But it also frees up so much energy because we stop fighting. We don't have to fight against that emotion that's there and is there. You can't push it down and make it go away. It doesn't go away. So the more we push it down, the more we're fighting it, and the more energy we spend. And by releasing that and going, do you know what? I accept that I have these negative emotions, and I'll now observe them and find out what is it that's behind it. And then I can come through it.
Very well said. And in this podcast, we have explored emotional intelligence with many guests and from many perspectives. And I look back at a phase of my life when I was struggling with emotions. And what I felt is the negative emotions, they are, taking a deep root into me. And I'm just kind of bearing that weight all the time, be it can be anger, can be frustration, can be sadness, can be any number of things. But emotional intelligence gives us that insight that was never there before, like a cloudy kind of a vision. And then if you achieve it, then if you can release it, it suddenly becomes so much more clarity. You know, I believe that is what you are talking about as well, in a way.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that it is in us, and ignoring it or hiding it or pretending we can get rid of it is not going to help. We need to have that space where we explore it. If we have those feelings, then curiosity and honesty are the ways to start exploring it.
And now that you teach this to people, is it possible for you to share, some areas where you find people, struggling with it? What are some of the common problems that they come to you with, and then you show them the mm, the healing path with shadow work? Is it possible for you to share? I mean, you feel free to. We can skip this if you don't want to talk.
No, no, no. Like without going too much into specifics, what I find is very, very fascinating is that I work with the people who have been journaling a lot, as well as people who are complete beginners. But what comes up a lot is this sense that they've never gone into that space before. So they might have been journaling on a very superficial basis and just saying, what have I been doing? Or some basic gratitude journaling, perhaps, but not going into that sense of curiosity around who we are. Now, there can be a lot of resistance to it. So what I've done is I've structured all my work on Jung's concept of psychological alchemy, which is it's a four-stage process, but we only use the first three because the fourth stage is essentially becoming the Buddha and being fully enlightened. So it's not very relevant for most of us. Kind- I would love to say that we're teaching the fourth step, but I'm so far away from it myself. But the first step is what he called the blackening, which is essentially the first step of observation of the fact that we have something inside us that is in our shadow, something that is dark. And dark meaning not with light on it, not that it's necessarily a bad thing. The second stage is whitening, which is the process of observing it and looking at it, going, what is this? And the third stage is what he called the yellowing, and I like to call it the goldening because it's the real value is there. And the goldening aspect of it is to take that observation and turn it into something practical. Because what happens is people go into that shadow aspect and then look at why they have. Okay, so one example specifically that people were struggling with, which is really fascinating, was writing about a moment when they did something they were proud of. And this feeling of being proud of something was hard for several people to write about. And presumably it's something that comes from childhood where people are being told, stop being so cocky about what you've done or whatever it is. So they're pushing that pride down. And then through that observation of it, what is that about? You can start recognizing certain patterns. And then you can go, well, how can I apply that going forwards? And say, well, now I will, perhaps the first step is to admit that pride to myself. And then the next step later on will be to tell somebody else, like, oh my God, I'm so proud of the results that I had. And it's that process of that kind of circle of going through it. That's what's made the biggest difference for people that I've been working with now. And I think that's the real joy because where previously they might have gone into the shadow work and they would have stayed in the shadow and being miserable. Oh my God, why can I not be proud of myself? Why do I keep beating myself up? But then we run this process that takes them through the whole thing and they can actually see, well, now I can do something about it. I think that's the major benefit of the work that we're doing.
Very well said. And you touched upon something which is very crucial. I would say that a lot of people journal, but that is at a very superficial level,
Mm.
right? And to get the real benefits and to be free from these patterns is that they have to go deeper and understand this, right? So, how do you suggest that one can do that?
So I've mentioned it a couple of times without being very specific about how, but there are two things that really are critical to deep journaling. And the first one is curiosity. If you're not curious about your own emotions, about your own response to the world around you, then you'll never journal deeply. It really, it's how I journal. I I've got a range of techniques that I teach and a range of techniques that I use, but the number one thing that drives all of it is curiosity. So I'll start my day and I'll start with how do I feel? That's usually how I start in the morning. I have my cup of coffee and I write how do I feel? But then I question that. Is that really how I feel? If I say I'm tired, okay, do I accept the fact that I'm tired? That I could do, but then I can go, am I tired because I didn't sleep well? Am I tired because I'm emotionally exhausted? Am I tired because I'm physically exhausted? Am I depressed? Tiredness can be a symptom of depression. So all of these things are after I am tired. And without curiosity, you just accept it on face value and say, this is how I feel. I'm tired. But curiosity drives you to that point of going, well, I slept well. Why am I tired? I'm happy. Why am I tired? Is there some other need that's not being met? Okay, let's try to find out. But then the other thing that is critical in this is honesty. Because if I'm curious but not honest, I'm also stuck. I can go, I'm tired. Why am I tired? I'm tired because I didn't sleep well. Did I sleep well? Maybe I did. But I'm lying to myself because I don't want to get to the point that actually I'm quite unhappy with my life. But if I acknowledge the fact that I'm unhappy with my life, I have to deal with it. Then I have a cause for my current situation. And there's a natural sense that, well, then I have to deal with it. But if I don't kind of accept that this is what I'm in, I don't have an obligation or a responsibility to deal with it. So honesty and curiosity, when they're combined, are such a powerful kind of just two concepts that can drive everything. That being willing to say, I am sad, and then go, why am I sad? Will release so much more than writing about three things that you're grateful for. I do not want to shit on gratitude journals because I think it has a real value, but I do think a lot of the time people are doing tick box journaling. Okay, I did my journaling today. What did you do? I wrote about being grateful for my cup of coffee in the morning. I don't want to be grateful for my cup of coffee in the morning. I want to be grateful for more, but I need to be honest about that.
Thank you for explaining that. And I see this kind of labeled journaling that you say you open and then you say you the tick box journaling that you mentioned. That is very true. I mean, I've seen that when you start with a blank page and then there are it opens with that emotional avenues that you try to understand what kind of has happened. And this is a very interesting conversation I recently had with my brother that a lot of our sort of insecurities, emotions, we are very similarly wired, both me and my brother. And it turns out to be some kind of deep rooted insecurity that both of us have in common. And until I discovered that, through writing and exploring, I wouldn't have gotten to that surface that, okay, this is where it stops. This is where it is. This is insecurity. This is something maybe happened 30 years ago, but it has stayed with me thus far and it is making me insecure in today's environment, be it work, be it social gathering, be it family, be it anywhere else. So I can see where you are coming from that, if you have just journal for the sake of journaling and then you haven't really explored that inner meaning of it or found that connection to yourself. So that is very powerful and very amazing. And the next thing I wanted to ask you is that, you know, can you tell us a little bit about, when we are writing this down, when we have identified that, okay, this is the reason for my sadness, okay, this is the reason for my maybe anger, maybe any, it can be any kind of emotions, okay, so I've found that, then how do we come out of it? Because I keep seeing this, like a lot of people say that, oh, okay, I'm doing this but I'm not getting any better. We are kind of stuck in that cycle. How do we interrupt it and how do we kind of come out of it? I mean, I had a very personally very life changing experience, and I'm just curious to hear that, how do we, okay, once we have found out that this is what is causing it, how do we come out of it?
Okay, that's a great question. And it's really fascinating because there are a few layers here. The first thing I would say is we never know what causes anything, and that's okay. I think we have a strong desire to label things that this is why, this is what happened to me, and now I know. And I was talking to one of my students about this because he was struggling to find out what it was that somehow made him feel in a certain way. And he was asking me, is it normal that I don't, like, I can't really feel that I can find out? And I said, that even if you find out, it doesn't make it true because everything that happens to us is essentially neutral. Like the universe doesn't label things that this is a good thing that happens, this is a bad thing that happens. Everything that happens is filtered through our point of view. And that means that we can look at one event with one filter, and we can look at that same event with a different filter, and we get two different experiences, which is why two people can experience relatively the same thing and come out of it with two completely different life-changing results. So the point here is you say, why am I angry? As an example, like I've been observing and finding out why am I angry. I think the first thing to accept is I think this is why I'm angry, right? And once we can accept that, and we can go, well, what is it that I am telling myself that makes me believe this is why I'm angry? So we get, we can extract a story. What is it that I am labeling this with to identify that as the reason for me being angry? When we start looking at the stories, then we can start reframing stories for the future. We can start retelling the story. These situations make me angry because of X, Y, Z. But if I analyze X, Y, Z and say, well, actually, that doesn't have to be like that. That was because this other person was behaving in their kind of reactive mode. So their intention wasn't to make me feel angry or to make me feel sad or abandoned or frustrated. So then I can start kind of creating, like, disconnecting all these things from that experience, and I can rewrite the story. And I can go, well, when this person says this that used to make me angry, I can now understand that whatever the story I've told, and I can rewrite my story. And I can say, when this person does this, I understand that they are coming from a place of being abandoned and hurt. And I recognize that. So now I will feel empathy for that person instead of frustration. I'll feel love for that person instead of anger. And this is, when I talk about this, I always feel like I sound like I'm selling some really banal, simplistic worldview. And life is quite banal when you look at it. Like there's a combination of meaninglessness and meaningfulness in life. Everything is meaningful and meaningless. And one thing that I found has helped me a lot recently is understanding that everything is made up. We made everything up. Everything that we have of value or zero value comes from our personal experience, and there's no objective decision that this means something. We've come to an agreement that gold is important and valuable, but gold itself is meaningless as a concept. There's like the rules that we live by are made up by somebody. We follow a rule and we say this is the rule that we have, but the point is that somebody still made it up. And that goes for our own life as well. I'm angry because of that, but I'm making that up. If I made that up, what if I make something else up? What if I recreate this and go like next time, these things that made me feel angry instead make me feel, I don't know, empathetic for this person being an asshole. Then suddenly I'm recreating my own life. I had like, and I use specific techniques for some of this work. I had a very deep conversation on paper with my sense of fear. And I was basically having a dialogue with fear, going, well, can you just stop? Can you kind of get out of my life? And then fear is going, well, what will I do? I'll be unemployed. So I was inside myself, I was basically asking myself to stop doing something that is extremely basic. Fear is a protective mechanism. This is scary, run away. Like it's a safety mechanism. So then we had a conversation around it and we recreated the definition of fear in the sense that fear now, instead of making me go, oh my God, this is horrible, I'm going to run away, it makes me go, this is exciting. And that conversation, even though I had that, I don't know, like almost a year ago, the results are still there. So now I've rewritten that. And when something is scary, my first thought is, yeah, but this could be exciting. And that has been exactly that process that I'm talking about. Taking something, redefining it, and then finding a way to live with a new story.
Very well explained. And, in today's world, we use this term healing in so many ways, but you add such a wonderful perspective to it. Like, you're feeling an emotion, and at the base of it, it can be something really simple, or what story we are telling ourselves, and that can change, that can repoint to something. And that, in today's world, we call it healing, we call it coping, so many terms that we have attached to mental health, but the explanation to it can be very simple. I love that explanation. I mean, I'm reading a lot on how emotions are made, and it gives me a sense of understanding what's happening below the surface. And you are absolutely spot on that this is, and it is what we label with. It is not absolute. It is very subjective in cases. And yeah, I think that what you explained about journaling, about shadow work, and about, I'll call it healing for the sake of completeness, but it does make sense to me. And for our audience, can I ask that do you work with people like over the internet, or it's just locally that you teach shadow work? If what if anyone wants to, work with you, once they see the interview?
So I'm doing everything online
Right.
as a major part of it. It's just so much easier to be able to reach people like that. I do run some live workshops every now and again here in Barcelona, where I'm based, but all my work is generally online. So I've just started building up a community at the moment. So I'm just getting people in from, we've got people in from all kinds of places in the world at the moment. And the idea is to run monthly workshops where we do a deeper session. So we would use, let's say, 60 to 90 minutes of work, writing together, sharing, and exploring. And then we'll be thematic. So we will choose certain topics and we'll run with a sequence of journaling techniques that kind of combine to bring us into like an experience. And then we're also running more open workshops where we'll be having a chance for people to connect and do some journaling exercises, spend more time connecting and sharing. I also did a WhatsApp group that's connected with it, and that's been so fantastic just to see how people are being able to share. This is what I'm struggling with at the moment. This is how my writing is, and see how much other people are involved in it. This is what's been one of the big realizations for me around community. That essentially, when we're writing in isolation, journaling is a very solitary experience. And I think it naturally is that because there's a private moment and being able to be completely honest with yourself on paper is critical. But that can also lead us into this sense of disconnect and think, oh my God, I'm crazy. Like I'm nuts if I'm writing this. I'm being curious, I'm being honest, and I think, Jesus Christ, I'm nuts. But by sharing and saying like I'm struggling with this, or somebody else says, I wrote this morning something that made me feel like I was nuts, other people read it and they go, oh my God, it's okay. Like I'm perfectly within what's normal and I'll keep going. And that has been an absolute joy here to see the amount of resistance that people have with writing and how it disappears when somebody says, I have struggled with this, but now I'm going through it. So if anybody's interested, then the best thing is just check out the website. That's where everything is. So unleash.inc, but I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes and
Yes,
so
I'll
it's
I'll
easier.
take
But
your details,
yeah,
and
yeah.
just wanted to say this to the listeners that if you wish to work with Oliver, I'll put a short bio and his website and contact details. So
Mm.
feel free to check that out, and of course follow him on social media. And I find his posts really really deep and insightful, and which is how we connected. And in the interest of time, I'll say we'll wrap up this episode here because we like to keep the discussions not too long and not too short in that window. It was absolute delight talking to you, and I would love to collaborate with you again uh, if you like. Thank you so
An
much for
absolute
taking the
pleasure.
time today.
Thank you. Thank you. Really interesting. I love talking about this, as you can see.
Yes, definitely. I love talking about it as well. We covered some really important topics, and we can go on and on for one episode. I think we have touched upon the right pointers, so to speak.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.